Hey, I'm Brian Foley, Houston criminal defense attorney and DWI attorney, and we're going to be talking about the walk and turn test. It is part of the field sobriety testing that officers have been doing since the 1970s. If you have gotten pulled over for DWI, they're going to do three tests on you. One's an eye test called the horizontal gaze nystagmus. One is this walk and turn test, and the other is a one-leg stand test. Um, I think that the walk and turn test might be the most important of the three tests when you're considering the weight and the value of a DWI case as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney. It's almost the same analysis. I used to be a prosecutor in Harris County. I was a felony chief prosecutor there, and I was also a chief prosecutor in Montgomery County. And we would see these cases all the time. I mean, when you're a brand new prosecutor, you're seeing DWIs almost every day. And then on the other side, as a defense attorney, I think the more skilled you are as a defense attorney, the more people trust you with the DWI because it's so technical. On the prosecution side, they actually give the DWIs to the brand new lawyers because the older lawyers kind of don't want to handle them, and they're very technical. There's a lot of science going on with the blood testing, breath testing, things like that. But we're just going to talk about the walk and turn test today. So it has been used since the 1970s. They did some original studies on the test that concluded, well, if you get a certain number of clues on these tests, then you could predict somebody's intoxication level. But the walk and turn test, I think, is one of the most likely tests to be prone to errors in the way that it's explained by the police during the instructions, and as well as the ineligibility to do the test at all. If you're over 65, they shouldn't do this test on you. If you're more than 50 pounds overweight, they shouldn't do this test on you. There's a couple other things that come up pretty often. Women or men, anybody wearing a heel of 2 inches or more, it says you should have been given an opportunity to take those shoes off or be given different shoes before you start this test. So let's take a look at the different clues that they're looking for when they do this test. So moving on to the clues, here they are. There's 8 clues that an officer is looking for, and they don't tell you that these are the clues they're looking for before they begin the test. The first one is that you can't keep balance during the instructional phase while you're listening to the instructions. What they do when they start the test is they say, okay, well, they normally do the HGN test, the eye test first, and then they'll say, now imagine a line, an imaginary line. Sometimes they use a real line. Most of the time, they use an imaginary line, and they'll say, put your left foot on that line right now. Now put your right foot in front of your left foot, touching heel to toe. Heel to toe. Keep your arms to your side while I'm telling you the instructions. Then they start going through all these instructions, and part of this test is to stay just like that, like they told you to, until the instructions are over. It doesn't matter how long the officer takes in giving the instructions, how confusing it is. This one happens all the time to people who are totally sober. They just relax for a minute, start listening to the officer, and they don't maintain that position, especially if the officer has to go over it 2 or 3 times or they have questions. Some of my smarter clients, are very inquisitive. They're asking questions. They want to make sure they're getting it right. And one of the things we do when we want to make sure we understand and we get things right is we ask questions. Well, they can try to count that against you in these field sobriety tests. And if you change your stance, maybe you didn't fall over or lost balance, you just, you know, gestured with your hands or something like that. Well, that might be using your arms for balance because when they say they're looking for that, they're looking for it to be more than 6 inches away from the side of your legs. You're supposed to be touching your legs basically when you do this test. So again, that first one is cannot keep balance while listening to the instructions. Then it starts too soon. So if you start counting, they say, we're going to take 9 heel to toe steps walking down the line. You're going to turn and then take 9 heel to toe steps back. If he doesn't finish the part where he says, keep your arms to your side, look at your feet while you're walking, count out loud. If he doesn't say that, then you started too soon. That's going to be counted as a clue against you. And right there, that would be 2 out of 8 clues. So there's no pass or fail on these tests, or at least that's what the police or the studies will tell you. Is there's no passing or failing. There's only the opportunity to view some of these clues. And they say that 2 or more clues is enough to reach what they call the decision point, which is the decision to arrest you. So in normal people terms, that's a failure, right? If you're going to get arrested for how you did on the test, that's a failure. So 2 out of 8 and you failed. So if you asked a question and you used your hands at the beginning, and then stepped your foot over to the side just to, stand normally while you're asking the question, you have uh, cannot keep balance while listening to instructions and use your arms for balance. That's 2 clues right there. They can happen really quick. If you started to, perform it as an example, like, is this how you want me to do it? Boom, that's starting too soon. If you stop while walking, this one happens all the time. Again, people who are trying to be careful that they do it correctly, they'll get to the turn, and we'll talk about improper turn here in a minute. But they get to the turn, it's a very strange way they ask you to do it. They ask you to leave your lead foot planted and take a series of small steps. You leave this one foot planted and then with the other one around in a circle. So when they get to that, if that is a confusing way to try to do it and be told, they'll say, "Is this right?" And they'll stop. Well, that counts as a stops while walking. Does not touch heel to toe. Each step is supposed to be perfectly heel to toe. Uh, the manual says they can have maybe a half inch ahead so that they're not touching. When they train you how to do this at the academy or as a prosecutor, I went through that training. They tell you to like click your heels, like really kind of like stomp it down on that toe so you can do it easier. Nobody's telling you to do that if you're pulled over for DWI. They just expect you to do it, normally. Then steps off the line, even if it's an imaginary line. Use arms for balance. That's moving your arms away from your side. An improper turn. So if you do an about face, and you twist both feet, that's an improper turn. If you take one step around, that's not, you're supposed to use a series of small choppy steps is what they'll say. And then the incorrect number of steps. Now, I've seen somebody take 34 steps on the walk and turn because they missed the part about 9. They didn't get credit for taking more steps than they needed to in a good way. They got penalized for, doing way too many. And so the incorrect number of steps is probably the one clue that I would say, if you're paying attention with some degree, you can probably get that one right. But it's not always the easiest thing to pay attention to these things, not necessarily because you're intoxicated, but it may be because you're nervous from the police. I know, even as a criminal defense attorney, knowing I've got my car on cruise control, if an officer pulls you over for some reason, it is scary. When those red and blue lights come on, it can be very nerve wracking, even if you've not done anything wrong, or even if whatever you did wrong was just speeding or something like that. It's a very minor thing. You get a ticket and move on. It's still a nerve wracking experience, even for a seasoned criminal defense attorney like myself. So that is the walk and turn. Those are all the different clues they're looking for. But what's most important about this is how the test is performed from I think, an objective point of view. If a jury is watching you do this test, are you doing it like you're intoxicated, or are you doing it and you're happening to show clues in it? So the number of clues you get on this test to me means nothing. It's how do you look on the video when it's happening? And I've seen people who were totally sober, their blood test came back all zeros, no alcohol, no drugs, and they looked terrible on this test, either because of an injury, because of nervousness, all sorts of things. And I've seen people who blood test, breath test came back very high, do quite well on this test. But this test, I think, is key in a criminal defense of a DWI case, because how you perform, how you look on this test is going to go a long way in people's minds. When you ask a random person on the street, what do they do to test drunk people? They say they make you walk a straight line. And that is this test. People are very familiar with it, and they're interested in seeing how you did on it. That's today's information about DWI. I hope you enjoyed it. These videos are for educational purposes. And if you have any questions, you got a video you want us to do, leave it in the comments below. We'll see you next time.